Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Justis Huni, the Australian heavyweight champion, has announced he'll be facing former rugby league player Paul Gallen on June 16 in Sydney, Australia. So we'll get to a post from Huni on social media announcing the fight, and then on to a few thoughts, because this confirmation, it really did take me by surprise for a few reasons. But we'll come to that later. But first, Huni's post on social media. So see here on screen, Justis Huni versus Paul Gallen, the promo graphic. Termination Day, as Huni puts it. So he's pitching himself as the Terminator, seemingly going to end Paul Gallen. So Gallen is an older fighter approaching 40, but he's had a string of victories, some of them quite high profile, just washed Lucas Browne in a round, and also beat a former MMA fighter, Mark Hunt, who many of us know from the combat scene. But the words that Huni has put up on the right-hand side, contracts are signed and we have a fight. Paul Gallen's boxing career is about to be terminated. And then on to a few different bits and pieces regarding tickets, etc. And I'm sure that this is going to generate quite a bit of interest in Australia, because Paul Gallen has quite a big profile. He was a rugby league player for a number of years. And just to, so there's no confusion, rugby and rugby league are different sports. There is a difference. They are two different codes. But Paul Gallen played rugby league, and Justis Huni, he's a boxer. He's had a good amateur career. He's qualified for the Olympics. He's had 3 fights as a pro so far, and he's won all of them, including his first fight, which was for the Australian heavyweight title. So what I'll do now is I'll just get to a couple of things around the sort of the tail of the tape, in a sense, because I think it's worthwhile going through for Huni and for Gallen, where they're at, where they've been, and then on to a few other bits and pieces that it's well worth talking about, because I'm surprised that this is being made so close to the Olympics, but we'll come to that. So you've got Huni currently 3-0 at the time of this video, and he actually does have a 4th low-level fight scheduled ahead of the Gallen fight. In his first fight, he beat Whainga Opilu, and then he fought Arsene Fosso in a second fight, and both those guys are sort of top 10 heavyweights in Australia. So he didn't go for easy work, straight off the bat. He was actually coming with some ambition and facing some guys who wanted to sort of bang with him and put up a decent effort, but Huni was too good for them. Currently, Huni is rated 3rd in the Australian heavyweight scene, actually behind Paul Gallen. So Gallen at number 2, and then you have world-rated Dempsey McKean at number 1. And for further context, and we'll circle back to this later, Huni intends to fight at the Olympics in Tokyo. He qualified by medaling at the 2019 World Championships. Gallen himself, he's 11-0 with a draw on his record as well, that draw against Barry Hall. And actually, and just bear with me here, there are some parallels to some degree between Gallen and YouTuber Jake Paul, given their recent run of fights. And hear me out on this one. So Paul, he fought a YouTuber, then an athlete in Nate Robertson, and then fought an MMA fighter in Ben Askren, and his logical next step is a bona fide boxer. So for Gallen, for example, 3 fights ago, he faced a fellow athlete, an AFL player in Barry Hall. Then he faced a faded MMA fighter in Mark Hunt, and then a husk of a husk boxer in Lucas Browne. So logically for Gallen, his next opponent should be someone who was better, who's actually got, closer or in their prime, who's someone who's actually a threat. And certainly Justis Huni, he meets that bill. He is a threat. Although there is 1 or 2 red flags preventing me from going all in on Justis Huni for this one, although I do believe he is the favourite. So Huni, he's got good skills, fast hands, he moves well, he's got good pop, maybe not elite punching power, but he's still a young guy, he's still obviously getting some of that man strength, but he's got decent power. He's taller than Gallen by an inch or so, he's got the slight reach advantage, and a difference from some recent Gallen opponents is he's not a plotter. He won't be a stationary target. He can punch on the move. And this will be key with Paul Gallen tracking forward, throwing shots. Gallen himself, he's crude but effective. He makes his volume his friend in his fights and often overwhelms opponents. We saw that against Lucas Browne. He just swarmed him and Browne just had no answer. And with so much coming from him in terms of the hands flying, it does make it hard to see some of those rabbit punches, the wrist shots, the forearms, the elbows that are also hitting opponents in between punches, actual legal punches landing. And it has to be said, no one really fights like a Paul Gallen in the amateurs, and very few fight like him in the pros. So it may not be a style that will be, all that familiar to Justis Huni. So it could take a bit of adjusting for the young pro, who, while he has a decent amateur background, he still is green in the scheme of things. I think we have to consider that. He should be the favourite for this one, but he is still green. Gallen applies and maintains very good pressure, and that in itself is going to be a bit taxing to cope with. We're going to see sort of Justis Huni's sort of mental fortitude tested. He's going to need to have a good game plan, and obviously he needs to catch Gallen with something early, catch him on the way in, to make him think twice about just charging forward relentlessly. Because if he can't get his respect, it makes it a much tougher night for Justis Huni to try keep Gallen off him. And this fight is listed on BoxRec as a 10-rounder. And that's actually different from many Gallen fights that have generally been 6-rounders. So for Justis Huni, I think that's a plus. As the longer distance, it could actually influence how much energy Gallen expends early. Typically, I think with the 6-rounders, he's just been able to go for it. But 10-rounder, that's a different story. And the longer the fight goes, I think it's more likely to favour Huni. And Gallen's style, it's been high octane, a lot of volume, and over 6 rounds, manageable. 10 rounds, harder to sustain. But Huni will need to be looking to land the more eye-catching work, the clean, effective work, and be aware that Gallen will be trying to just win rounds on activity, the volume, through his pressure, trying to be the ring general, trying to get rewarded in that sense. Gallen has a good engine. We've got to remember that. And if Huni can't hurt or stop Gallen, who has shown a good chin thus far, he needs to be banking rounds. He can't let them slip away by being outworked. And that could be something that's a risk in this fight. Gallen could be racking up rounds because of his volume. Just, landing more, but not necessarily looking very pretty in the process. Okay, so just moving on to a few other peripheral sort of issues around this fight. Why now? Why make this fight now? Why in June? Huni is going to the Olympics and fighting Gallen in what could be a very tough, arduous fight. There's the chance of getting injured, the chance of getting cut. Seems like an awfully high risk to be taking just a month or so out from the games. I mean, perhaps part of the plan is to build his name now, build the brand before the games, get the Australian people supporting him, make him into a pay-per-view fighter, have him fighting on pay-per-view afterwards, and he can use Gallen's name to build his own. And if he medals at the Olympics, well, all the better they can build off that too. But while this seemingly would be a very lucrative event, easily a career high payday, is the risk worth it? Doing it right now, so close to the Olympics? It's a question. Next point. Gallen might be rudimentary, but he has shown enough that at a certain level, he's a problem. He's a hard night's work. The question I have, is it too much too soon? And I think it is a legitimate question to be posing. I mean, some might sort of scoff at that, but, you look at Huni, he's still pretty green, and the best time for Paul Gallen to beat him is now, sooner rather than later. And I'm asking myself, is the risk really worth taking this fight now? The fight will presumably still be there in 6 to 12 months, surely. And then throw on the risk of injury to Huni before the Olympics, is it worth it? Also, something that may turn out to be a bit of a red herring, but is worth throwing into the mix here. The whole concussion symptoms that Justis Huni had earlier in 2021. So there was a fight, it was scheduled, what was the end of January or for February, I can't exactly remember. Ended up being delayed, and it was explained away at the time as resulting from Justis Huni having concussion symptoms, having been concussed in some sort of wrestling incident where he ended up sort of, hitting the deck, on some concrete, had a bit of a grazed face, all that sort of stuff. He was horsing around with a friend. But that only sort of came to light, and this was the explanation that was given when he was sort of hurt in sparring. He was put down in sparring, and this is the clip on screen. I'm sure some of you would have seen it, others maybe not, but this is what happened, and you can see here Justis Huni going down. But my take on that is he was caught with a very good shot. I mean, rather than anything else. I mean, it just looked like he got caught on the button and obviously was shaken up by that, goes down. I know some people will say have said that he's been knocked out and all sorts, but to me, he was caught with a good shot, goes down. And you go sort of look at that, and then you sort of, that wrestling story that was put out there in the media to the public, it certainly sounds a little thin, doesn't it? And maybe it raises that question, how good is Justis Huni's chin? And the whole sort of concussion symptoms for a young fighter so early in his career, red flag. And we have so far seen him take 1 or 2 decent shots in the Opilu and also the Fosso fights, but it's not like his chin has really been totally tested under the bright lights in the ring. And I guess some cynics will say, well, maybe there are some issues and they want to make some money now, cash in ahead of any sort of issues really sort of arising and coming to the fore. I guess for me, time is just going to prove all of this out. I need to see more before making any judgments. Clearly, he's a talent, meddling at the World Championships and obviously winning a title, the Australian title in your first fight. Certainly that is noteworthy. He's been generating more buzz than any other sort of up-and-coming heavyweight in the Australasia region since Joseph Parker, and Parker turned pro almost a decade ago now. Clearly, he's got a long way to go. He's looking to round out his amateur ambitions and build a pro career. They want to make him into some sort of pay-per-view fighter. But we just have to realise, I think Paul Gallen is not a pushover. And if Huni can beat him, though, and look good in the process, that will really help his stock and likely solidify him as a fan favourite, potentially a pay-per-view option in Australia going forward. But is it too much too soon? You let me know. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.